About the dismantling of the Federal Reserve. This is something that seems to be taking place right now when you listen to the mainstream media and you observe some of the conditions that are now being faced by the Federal Reserve. Ultimately, they are facing these consequences of resigning board members who are essentially being pressured to quit or resign. And then on top of it, now we got Lisa Cook, who is a voting member of the FOMC. She is now being told by the administration that she needs to resign because of some fraudulent real estate deals that she supposedly has done just recently. So all this shakeup that is now taking place within the Federal Reserve, I believe, is a huge cover-up. I think this is a huge distraction and a huge cover-up for what it is that's about ready to take place within the Fed strategy. Now, I have talked about this so many times on this channel that it seems that there's really nothing else that I even discuss. But it's the consensus statement, the statement on long-run goals and monetary policy strategies. This consensus statement that comes out every 5 years or so is up for review and will be a new statement issued at some point at the end of summer or the beginning of fall. Now, right here, right now, we have all this attention and what I call like probably huge pressure to change or shift the way that the Federal Reserve is conducting themselves. Essentially, Donald Trump wants the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates and stimulate the economy and, do all these wonderful things that he says is going to take place on account of it. And the Federal Reserve is pushing back against that, saying, hey, we have to stay the course in order to achieve the dual mandate of low prices, low stable prices, and full employment. Now, when you have these two distractions that are being pushed at each other, basically the administration saying you need to conduct yourself in this particular way, and the Federal Reserve is saying, hey, we're conducting ourselves in order to achieve our goals, and these battling back and forth, every time you see something come out where you have a Fed official resigning or being pressured to quit, or in this case with Lisa Cook being accused of these fraudulent deals, this puts out the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So now the people are very alert, they're very worried, they're very upset about the whole idea. And now here we have this consensus statement that's going to be coming out anytime now with all these changes. Now tell me right now that there is no way that the mainstream media isn't going to use the shift of the Federal Reserve officials, these governors, these ones who are being replaced, resigning, or even quitting or whatever, that they are not going to use that as the excuse for the change in the consensus statement. This is going to be a huge distraction. It's why I'm making this video right now, is because I am predicting that to be the case. That they are going to use all this change, this shifting of the Fed governors, or reconditioning of the Federal Reserve, or whatever it is that's being pushed out there through the mainstream media, this expectations of what's going to be taking place in the Fed, and then having these major shifts happen, and then at the same time have the consensus statement come out. There's no way that the mainstream media is not going to run with that. Say that the consensus statement has changed because of all these changes to the Fed governors and to the FOMC. Ultimately, that consensus statement is written now. It is ready to be deployed now. Whatever changes to the FOMC, that's not going to change the consensus statement. That's not going to change the long-run policies, strategy, everything that the Federal Reserve is going to do. That is now written. It's just waiting to be deployed. Now, once you shift all these governors and then you deploy that consensus statement, tell me, how much power is that going to have? It's going to be huge. Everybody's going to say, oh man, we got this major change now happening to the Federal Reserve with all these changes to the Fed governors. But really, it's just the consensus statement that is coming out. That statement that comes out every 5 years that says, hey, this is the way that we are going to be conducting ourselves into the future. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is flying on the seat of their pants. They are not. They have a long-term strategy that I have been breaking down on this channel for years now. Right? It goes all the way back to, it goes back 20 plus years. this long-term strategy that they have going. They knew that they were going to be running into the lower bound of zero, and that inflation was going to disappear, and that was going to be a nightmare for them, and that the ultimate goal was to figure out how it is that they could get a return to the inflation expectation to be elevated. That was their ultimate goal. For 20 plus years now, they have totally achieved it, and it is working swimmingly for them right now. So much so that people think that they made a mistake, don't know what they're doing. In the background, they are giving each other high fives. They are pulling this off. They have pulled the wool over everybody's eyes. It's a huge cover up for what is really taking place. Now, having been so focused in on the Fed strategy and the consensus statement and the words that are coming from the FOMC policymakers themselves, not from Jerome Powell, who's a spokesperson, I'm talking the people who are making the decisions within the FOMC itself. When you start following these people, when you listen to the words that they are using, when you listen to what it is that they have as far as plans for the future, it has no alignment whatsoever with the mainstream media. In fact, the mainstream media, I don't even know where the hell they get their information, considering it is so far off from what the reality of the monetary policy is saying. Just the simple fact of a 2% target that 99% of the people believe that the Federal Reserve is attempting to get has distracted, has thrown people off its course in such a way that there's no possible way they could be making appropriate financial decisions for themselves. Like literally 99% of the people. They are very lucky in the sense that if they are looking at the Federal Reserve believing that they are going for a 2% target, those people who believe that have been very, very lucky, because that's not what the Federal Reserve is doing. If you are successful right now believing that there is a 2% target that the Federal Reserve is attempting to achieve, you have been very lucky, because that is not what the Federal Reserve is trying to do. The Federal Reserve is trying to get to moderately above 2% for some time, because that's what they wrote in the consensus statement 5 years ago. They have said it and repeated it over and over again within their own statements, within the speeches. Moderately above 2% for some time to make up for the shortfalls. The shortfall from the 2% target, because the Federal Reserve cannot achieve a 2% target. Never in the history of their existence have they ever been able to maintain a 2% target. I don't know why in the world people would believe that they can do it into the future. That is such... There is no evidence of that being possible. The Fed has never been able to do it. So how it is that people say, well, they're trying to get to a 2% target. And no, they're not. They're trying to maintain a 2% long-term inflation expectation. And during times of below target inflation, which is running below 2%, the Federal Reserve has to make up for that. Meaning that there is going to be times where they are going to run persistently above 2% to make up for that shortfall. The makeup strategy essentially says that they will either be running below or above consistently forever so that they can maintain a long-term average of 2%. If you were consistently running at 1 or 3 or 1 or 3 or 1 or 3, what would the average be? It would be 2%. That's what the Federal Reserve is doing. They aren't trying to maintain 2%. There was a time in history that's what they would do. If inflation ran above 2%, they would try to adjust policy to bring it to the 2% target. If it ran below it, again, they would try to adjust policy to bring it up to the 2%. Now, that's not the case. They just tell people, hey, we're attempting to get to 2% over the long run. But there are times in which that they have to make up for the shortfall. It's called flexible average inflation targeting. Look it up. FAIT. Flexible average inflation targeting is what the Federal Reserve is doing. 2% target is not what they are doing. Okay? And this, again, has probably got 99% of the people completely confused about what it is that's taking place within monetary policy, and this is done on purpose. The Federal Reserve does this on purpose. They deploy that information in such a way that allows you to believe on something that they are not attempting to do. It's the ultimate in gaslighting. I mean, the ultimate. They have allowed the people to believe that they are attempting to do something that they are not trying to do. Okay? If you believe it was like, no, the Fed is working really hard to get inflation down to 2%, and you really believe that, and then one day you find out that they were not trying to get it down to 2%, how upset would you be? Probably pretty upset. You were thinking, man, the Fed is trying to get inflation down to 2%, and then I'm trying to tell you, no, they're not. They are trying to stay above 2% for some time, moderately above, making up for the fact that they failed to achieve the 2% target over the previous 10 years. I don't know why it is that nobody else wants to talk about this. This is coming directly from the Fed itself. Right? Makeup strategy, just look it up. Federal Reserve makeup strategy. It became irrelevant during COVID. They literally had plans to push inflation expectation through social medias, music videos, through all kinds of online just programs like talk shows and stuff like that to push out an elevated inflation expectation. The whole point of that was to raise the interest rates. And the whole point of raising interest rates was to get the neutral interest rate, which was the Fed funds rate, which was very close to zero, the neutral interest rate being neither accommodating nor restricting, well, that Fed funds neutral interest rate was really close to zero. They needed that to be elevated. The only way to get the neutral interest rate to be elevated is through inflation expectations, not through any other means. Right? I mean, you can push inflation, you can sever the supply chain, push inflation, but essentially the supply chain will repair itself. But if you can keep the supply chain broken, if you can keep the people's expectations elevated, right? Credible threats of tariffs, credible threats of taxes, credible threats of slowdown, all these credible threats of all this crap that's coming elevates the inflation expectation and pulls the neutral interest rate higher. That's what the Federal Reserve had been attempting to do for 5 years now. I mean, essentially since they came out with that last consensus statement. And again, nobody really sees this, nobody looks at it. So when I think about all the distraction that is now being pushed out there through the mainstream media with things like Lisa Cook and her real estate deals being fraud and she needs to resign and that person resigned and this person's getting out of there and that person needs to be replaced, and it's all this huge shakeup that has taken place at the Federal Reserve, but maintaining or failing to maintain the idea that they are going for a consensus statement, a long-term strategy. All these people who are shifting positions at the Federal Reserve, when they get on at the Federal Reserve, they too will then try to achieve the consensus statement with their votes. Yeah. Nobody sees it. And I just don't get it. And this is one of the reasons why they are able to pull off a lot of the things that they do. People wonder, it's just like, how is it that the Federal Reserve even still exists nowadays? How it is that they haven't completely crashed the system? How it is that they are able to continue on with their devious deeds and everything that they are doing out there? This is it right here. They literally have the people completely confused on what it is that they are really doing. And with that confusion, they are able to maintain their power. Their power really comes from your expectations and how it is that they deliver that information through the mainstream media and deliver it to you. This is how the monetary policy is being conducted. It doesn't have to do with interest rate adjustments. I mean, it does, but that's like much secondary, right? Everybody is so focused in on interest rates because that is how they are able to control you. Look at the interest rate. Look at the interest rate. Now let's talk about the interest rate. Is the interest rate going up or down? Ooh, bad interest rates, good interest rates. Interest rates, big time deal. We'll focus in on the interest rates. All right, now that we got you all focused in on the interest rates, let's make this thing either more powerful or more restricted. Stimulating or restriction. Just simply off the words. Oh man, interest rates are going to go up. They're going to go up by a lot. Right? Tell me that's not going to restrict the economy. Interest rates are going to drop. They're going to drop significantly. Oh, well, we already see mortgage rates coming down. You see how they're doing? They haven't done anything. The Fed hasn't done nothing. They're standing still. They keep talking, oh, we're going to move, we're going to move. Guess what? We're going to move. Right? And everybody's like, how are they going to move? What are they going to move? And it was just like, oh, they're going to cut. They're going to cut a lot. They're going to cut emergency purpose. 3 interest rate cuts this year. Boom, down go the mortgage rates. You see how they're easing financial conditions and they don't have to do anything? If it becomes too powerful, just reverse it. Oh man, asset prices are inflating. Jobs market still seems to be resilient. I guess we're just going to have to stay the course. Can't cut interest rates. boom, man, there comes restriction into the economy. Didn't have to do anything, right? All they have to use is their words. They just have to deploy the information and have it well received. It's working. It totally works. This is why I know this stuff is a cover-up, right? You can change all the Fed officials, every single one of them. They have the consensus statement that they are attempting to achieve. And I know a lot of people out there will be like, oh no, they just do whatever they want. They'll just make up their own rules. They'll do stuff, blah, 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 right? All this conspiracy stuff. And I think to myself, can you prove any evidence of that stuff? Absolutely not. You can't. You can't prove the Fed to be political because there's nothing inside of anything that they have ever done that's been political. As much as people wish and hope and dream that it was, they're incorrect. They're absolutely incorrect on that. Yeah. And now you can assume all kinds of stuff. Oh, well, they did it during this time, so they must have done it for the Biden administration or something like that. And I'm thinking, you do realize that the moment that they cut to the time that it actually impacts the economy is 6 months to a year. You realize that didn't happen back then for that administration. It's now happening for this administration. See, this administration gets to take advantage of all those interest rate cuts because they're now finally impacting the economy. But everybody wants to believe it was to help Biden. Right? See, this is how distracted and delusional people really are about it. They have no idea about the lag period, and then they have no idea that the Federal Reserve is literally guiding markets with their words. Once you recognize it, once you see it, the whole political blame game completely goes right out the window. And then you actually see it for the accuracy of what it is. Right? And I know a lot of people are going to get upset and argue and say, oh man, you just have really no clue about the politics and all that other stuff in there. And I laugh my ass off at that. I really do, because I'm thinking to myself, man, there is nobody on the internet who has been as accurate as I have when it comes to understanding the neutral interest rate. That neutral interest rate rising on the inflation expectation, making the economy less restricted. And now here we are seeing high stock markets, high labor market being resilient. All these people are wondering, it's like, wow, what is up with this resilience? Why is this taking place? We just don't get it. Nobody understands this. And I'm thinking, dude, do you not realize I put a video out almost 2 years ago explaining this in detail? As the neutral interest rate rises on an inflation expectation, it will make the economy less restricted. Here we are. It's right here, right now, taking place. And if people want to deny it, that's fine. I mean, what is it? No biggie to me if you deny it or not. I'm just trying to explain what it is that people can look at so that they can understand what it is that they need to do with their own personal decisions. Whether or not you're going to go out there and buy that house, whether or not you're going to buy a car, start a business, invest into things. All these ideas of what it is that people need to do with their own personal decisions is unique to every single person. There's nothing that I could possibly say in a video that is going to be a general all-purpose answer for everybody. That is not possible. And anybody who does videos like that is really talking out of delusion. There's no way. If you are 18 years old trying to get a start in your life, or you're 80 years old trying to hold on to whatever it is that you have for the rest of your life, you are making completely different decisions. There's no way that somebody can give you an all-purpose advice. It just can't work like that. My advice is to share with you the underlying economic forces, how they impact the economy, how it is they impact different parts of the financial system, and how it is that it could impact your life. Use that information to better position yourself. You have to look at it for yourself. I mean, if we had sat around and had a conversation, I mean, I could throw out ideas about what it is you got going on in your own personal life, but I can't do it in a video. I can't do it off of a comment. I can't do it like that. That's not the way it works. All right? What time is it? Man, 19 minutes into it, I really rambled. All right, what do we got going on here? I don't know, buy assets is a general statement that holds true. Yeah, but then people ask me, what assets do you buy? I mean, are you talking property? Are you talking stocks? Are you talking bonds? Are you talking crypto? Are you talking ammunition? I mean, all these things are typically an asset. Now you got financial assets, like, equity assets, real estate assets, crypto assets. Now you can start breaking it down. Okay, well, real estate asset, are you talking about like buying raw land and building on it? Are you talking buying an apartment complex? Are you talking buying, there's all kinds of stuff. Everything is unique to the individual. Just simply write down to, where it is that you deploy your savings. Do you put it into crypto or do you put it into cash? Do you put it into gold and silver? I mean, there's so many places that you could go to just to save, right? uh, Here we are stuck in the middle with you. All right. Could the expectations of higher inflation as a result of tariffs make the inflation spiral out of control and the jobs market to weaken? Nope, absolutely not. Right? And because, and this is what's funny about it, there was a time that I would have said, yeah, absolutely, that totally could happen, but not now, right? Not now, because the Federal Reserve is desperate for that inflation. Like, even the idea that the tariffs are going to cause inflation and spiral out of control and inflation, it was just like, man, that is a Federal Reserve's wet dream for the people to believe that. I don't know how many people realize that. The Federal Reserve is begging for you to hold and maintain hyperinflation scenario. They want you to have that. That's what's crazy about it, right? See, this is what's mind-blowing. Once you figure this stuff out and you realize, man, the Federal Reserve was stuck at the lower bound of zero. They were stuck there. They were like, what are we going to do with monetary policy, guys? We're stuck at the lower bound of zero. Panic situation. Bernanke's like, no. Guys, we're at the lower bound of zero. We have the attention of the financial markets. We got this. Let me explain it to you with the gold machine, okay? Let me explain it with a hypothetical gold machine. This is Ben Bernanke, right? And he says, listen, when you're stuck at the lower bound of zero and no more downward adjustment is capable to stimulate the economy, a lot of people would say, man, you're out of ammunition. But this is clearly mistaken. Here, let me tell you a little parable. Right? Supposedly, a guy invents a gold machine, and with this gold machine, he can produce as much gold at will with very little cost or energy. Right? The moment that this information gets out to the public, the price of gold would do what? Boom, it would plummet immediately, just off of the fear that this guy could make all this gold. Like, he doesn't even have to have the machine. It just needs to be scientifically proven, verified, and well publicized. If you put out those three components to it, you will lower the price of gold on the market. Even before the guy produces a single ounce of gold or has the machine or any of that, it just has to have the credible threat that he can do it. And that is the monetary policy. Okay? This hypothetical gold machine that could adjust the asset price. That's the new monetary policy. Ben Bernanke developed this policy way back in early 2000, years before the great financial crisis, knowing the great financial crisis was coming. He admits it. He admits it right in that speech. Deflation, how to prevent it from ever recurring in America, in the United States, November of 2002. Ben Bernanke speech, November 2002, deflation, how to prevent it. Go and read the speech. Literally talks about the great financial crisis coming, knowing that it's coming, knowing that we're going to be out of monetary policy with interest rate adjustments, and him saying that's okay. You don't really need to adjust interest rates. You just need the people's expectations of it. And that is now the monetary policy. So once you see it, once you recognize and once you know that interest rate adjustments are not necessarily the monetary policy anymore, but the communication about it literally developed better than 20 years ago in order to deal with the lower bound of zero, and the interest rate adjustments was no longer an effective tool, and the Fed essentially being out of ammunition, they're like, man, that's not our only tool, you know. We got forward guidance, credible threats. And it works. It works so well. Nobody sees it. That's why it works. Right? There's the scariest part about it. With the elevated inflation expectation, they were able to regain their monetary policy, the ammunition. Pushing the interest rates up, pushing the neutral interest rate up. Now the Federal Reserve is in a position in which that if they did lower interest rates back to zero, they would be far enough below neutral to actually stimulate the economy. Remember, the Fed funds rate at neutral is when they are neither accommodating nor neither restricting nor accommodating the economy. When they drop below neutral by a significant amount, that stimulates the economy. That stimulates financial markets. Now, when the Fed is up here and the neutral interest rate is moving ever closer to them, this makes the economy less restricted. That's what they are attempting to do with elevated inflation expectations. They have all the tools in the world to deal with inflation. They can raise the interest rates. They can cut back on debt issuance. There is all kinds of things that they could do to deal with the inflationary scenario. The problem that they face is a liquidity crisis. How is it that they are able to, how is it that they are going to be able to print at a pace that is fast enough in order to cover all the world's dollar denominated debts? That's the bigger issue. The Federal Reserve would love it if every single person in the entire globe had hyperinflation scenarios stuck on the brain. That would be a benefit to the Federal Reserve. Literally, the End the Fed campaign provides power to the Fed. Like, that is a power play to the Fed. Now, whether it's done on purpose or not is irregardless. All right? It doesn't matter. Being able to deploy the information, to be able to raise the inflation expectation, that is the main tool. That is, right? Because if you can raise that neutral interest rate off of the expectation, you can adjust the restriction or the accommodation within the monetary policy. They can use their words to do this. They can use the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what it is that people believe is coming from the future. They can use the people's own misunderstandings of the Federal Reserve and how it is that they are really operating. They can use that misunderstanding against the people, and they are doing it. They are doing it right now, and it's working for them. All right, what time is it? All righty, guys, I'm going to give it a few more minutes here. The Fed doesn't decide how much debt to issue. The Treasury does. That uneducated economists would have learned that in economics. I didn't say how much debt that they issue. I said how many dollars they issue. Can they buy the debt at a pace that is fast enough in order to provide the liquidity to the world? They don't issue out the debt. No kidding. Duh, they buy the debt from the government. In fact, they don't even buy it from the Treasury, right? That's something that you should actually learn from the Federal Reserve and their charter. They have to buy from the primary dealers. They have to buy it from a secondary market, because if they went directly to the Treasury, they would be monetizing the debt, and that would be technically illegal, right? It'd be against their charter. The Federal Reserve buys assets and puts them on their balance sheet and issues out liquidity. They issue out liabilities, right? That's the reserves, the Federal Reserve notes, the bank deposits that are out there, right? This is not the bank deposits, the reserves that the banks hold on deposit, right? I mean, it's not like I don't understand the Federal Reserve. I mean, I study this stuff every single. Oh, you guys back? All right, my phone is overheating. Let me set it over here. I had it in the. All right. Yeah, my phone was overheating and the app shut down. Let's see if I can set it right here in the shade. Well, I'll just hold it for a second. All right, let's go ahead and finish this live stream off. Thank you guys for sticking around. We got 156 people who stuck through. All right. Damn, it stopped on me. Sees the super chat. Let's go back and see if I can find it. There it is. Right. Oh. What happens when people stop? Oops, I was covering it up. What happens when people stop believing that the Fed will lower rates or print money? Is that when they have to use their ammo again? Why would people stop believing that? I mean, I understand that I'm trying to push that idea out there for people to internalize. God, can you just stay there for a second? I guess I can't. Okay, hold on here, guys. All right, so what would give the Federal Reserve, like, what would cause people to stop believing the Federal Reserve? Like, they already don't believe the Federal Reserve. What would get them to not believe them? All right? And see, here's the thing about credible threats. If the people don't believe that they're going to cut rates, then they'll just do it. Right? There's no way that the credible threat doesn't work, because they can always just do it. That's the point of the credible threat, is because it's truly credible. Like, it's not. See, a lot of people say, well, it's just like they can only cry wolf so many times. It's not crying wolf. There's a damn wolf. They'll let the wolf loose. They're saying, hey, there's a wolf. Do something about it. Right? And so the people do. And that's the difference inside of it, is that it's an actual credible threat. Like, okay, let's just use the example of the special purpose vehicles that they had used to set up the corporate debt lending facility. Here they had this corporate debt lending facility funded with hundreds of billions of dollars, ready to buy into the corporate debt market during COVID to try and, try and save the fallen angels. Now, the idea of the Federal Reserve buying into corporate debt was like one of the biggest conspiracy things out there. Like, people were like, dude, the Federal Reserve is going to be picking the winners and losers. And so all this information came out about how it is that the Federal Reserve was manipulating the corporate debt market. Corporate debt issuance skyrocketed. Yields completely plummeted. The demand for corporate debt was off the charts. And the Fed hardly bought any at all. In fact, that whole demand for corporate debt exploded before, like, it increased before the Fed even had that special purpose vehicle up and running. Like, most of the corporations found all the funding they need just by the idea of the establishment of these special purpose vehicles in the corporate debt lending facility. Because why did it work so well? Because it was a real credible threat. If the market didn't come in and buy up all that corporate debt, the Fed would have done it. But they didn't need to, because they said that they were going to do it. And the market said, hell, let's front run the Fed. And they went out there and bought up into the corporate debt, and the Fed looked at the Treasury and said, good job. We didn't have to do anything, right? And that's how the credible threat works. Is because even if you were to say, hey, man, the Fed ain't going to buy that corporate debt, and they're like, well, sure we will. And then they would go and do it. And people were like, well, I guess that was a real threat, not just a crying wolf. Like, the credible threats are real. They're real threats. Real threats of tariffs. But if you raise the inflation expectation, you get the power out of the credible threat of a tariff, then you don't necessarily need the tariff anymore. But if you didn't do it, then they would have to go ahead and inflict the tariff. Sever the supply chain and increase the inflation. Because it would work. All right. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Steva? Very cool of you. All right. It's for full time. Good luck, Heather. What did Heather have to say? I don't know. I can't find her topic. Bro has made literally millions off one UE membership. $1 membership. I have not made millions. I don't know where. I've had so many people now come to me and was like, dude, congratulations on becoming a millionaire. And I'm like, that's a good one, man. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I am so far from being, well, I'm not far from being a millionaire, but I'm not exactly close. So it's just like, I don't know where that comes from, you know? If I had taken the sponsorships, I would have. All right. It's not about material, it's about belief system. Imagine a nation so beyond arrogant that the majority of its people support the notion of bringing back all the jobs and commerce to the U.S. when the U.S. already the richest, most prosperous nation. I don't know. Okay, let me ask you something. So, like, I used to live next to, like, I have a buddy, all right? I used to live next to when I lived in town, I lived next to a guy not too far from where I lived. And he had a really nice house, really nice cars, really nice, like, everything. But completely debt saturated. He didn't have any money to pay extra bills. He didn't have any of that stuff. But the appearance looked really good. Like, I mean, he had this appearance that he was kicking ass. But the reality was much different. See, that's the problem that the United States faces, is that we have like, oh man, look, you have access to new vehicles and food and all this other stuff, and you got all these wonderful experiences that are happening there. You guys are the richest people in the world. And it was like, not really, right? What we have done is we have borrowed into existence that experience. So now at some point in the future, we're going to have to postpone our enjoyment to pay for the past consumption. That's not being the richest person in the room, right? So understand that most of the United States is sitting in that compromised position, in which that the moment that the new debt issuance turns off, and the Federal Reserve is no longer buying into the treasuries, then we are going to have a problem here in the United States trying to maintain our elevated lifestyle. It is going to plummet quickly, and we will find out how prosperous we really were. Right? But at this time, it's a great illusion, right? I mean, it can create the reality: drive a new car, live in the new house, wear the fancy clothes, eat the good food, do all that other stuff. But you have to remember, it's all on borrowed. It's borrowed time. Right? And now whether you pay for it or your kids or your grandkids, somebody at some point has to pay the piper. Because we are not producing to trade for this experience. We're leveraging our future. Huge difference. It's not prosper. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people in that system are doing quite well. They have positioned themselves to take advantage of it, to get the cash flow, so that they can just sit around and watch the money machine work for them. Right? Most people don't experience that. BRICS just started using Indian rupees for future transactions. Yeah, there's not enough of it to do the transactions to make up for what it is that the United States is doing. Besides, India wants to be a producer-saver nation. There's no way that they are going to be able to produce enough safe and liquid assets in order to replace that of what it is that the U.S. treasuries are doing. That's not a scary thing. That's just it's just more signs of the times that there are. In fact, to me, when I look at that, when I see like India using rupees to do these international transactions, that's actually a benefit to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is going to be in a position in which that they are going to find a liquidity crisis coming in the future, where there is not going to be enough dollars. Not enough dollars to pay off all the debt. People are going to be selling assets at cheap prices in order to acquire the dollars they need to pay off those debts. People have no idea that the liquidity crisis that is coming is going to be extreme. It's going to be bad, really bad. And when the dollar is not used, there has to be something that can replace, fill the void. Okay? The problem that all these other BRICS nations are going to face in trying to fill that void is none of them want to be in debt to the level that the United States has done. The United States is the greatest debtor in the history of time. All right? There's no other nation out there that says, hey man, I'm going to step up and I'm going to borrow into existence as well as the United States has done, because, you know, essentially we got the confidence to sell as much bond issuance as the United States has done. It's delusional thinking. It can't happen. All right? India's doing trades in rupees is a very tiny little consequence. And it's not even a consequence. It's actually a benefit. It's a huge benefit. That's what it is. It's a benefit to the Federal Reserve. All right, do you get a new phone? The video looks different. No, I didn't get a new phone. It's my same old Samsung phone that I've been using for like 5 years because I don't like buying anything. I don't like buying nothing new, right? This phone is still recording. People talk about how great the images are. Still going strong. There's absolutely no point buying another phone. I mean, the screen's all cracked to hell, but, you know, camera's fine. All right, I have worked my ass off to not be in the minimum wage bracket. Also dropped out of college in 2016, so no student debt. Why not price hike? Wouldn't be valid response in a liquidity crisis. I feel the can keeps getting kicked down the road with the liquidity crisis and the road is ending. I don't think so. I think that the road is probably going to become so endless of a possibility with the ideas of tokenization, central bank digital currencies, stable coins. Like the idea that they could lock you into the system so that you cannot get out and then charge you a negative interest rates means that that road of debt issuance, the possibilities of it could be gone forever, right? And I know that's not like a real concept, but neither was the idea of negative interest rates. Now the idea of a negative interest rates is a real concept, right? So now we have to think, is there a real possibility that they could continuously go into negative interest rates forever? I mean, it doesn't seem right, but then again, none of this seemed right. Like they should never have been able to get to this level to begin with. But yet, here we are. What time is it? Do I have to go? No, I gotta go, guys. This was a lot of fun. Thank you much for hanging out while the phone cooked and shut down. All right, you're back. You cut out. Yeah, I was just telling people that my phone, I had it sitting in the window over here, and I had a shield behind it, but it didn't matter. It still got cooked. All right, Fed, the most eternal Wizard of Oz ever. So it's going to get bigger and bigger. Yeah, and that's what I see really happening. I got to go, guys, but really this is what I end up seeing happening is that if they are able, which I see taking place, so the what if seems to really be happening. If they are able to issue out the stable coins, the central bank digital currencies, lock people in, remove cash, and take interest rates into negative territory, the new debt issuance that would be taking place from there would send the inequality onto a rocket ship. We would most definitely have two different economies happening at that point, right? There would be the people who have this absolute insane amount of money, and then everybody else, right? Because the inequality will continue to go worse so long as you have new debt issuance, new money issuance. And if you go into negative territory, central bank digital currencies, tokenizing, stable coins, whatever, that basically getting cash out of the system, that will lock you in, and who knows what they can do with you after that. I mean, it's a very real possibility that they are leading down. So if they pull it off, all I see is massive inequality after that. Like serious amounts of it. Like if you thought it was bad now, this ain't nothing compared to what it's going to be. All right. I gotta go, guys. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.